ثانية على حب الحسن والحسين. ثالثة على حب سيدة نساء العالمين بأعلى أصواتكم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Salutations upon you, my master, O messenger of Allah. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المعصومين المظلومين. Salutations upon you and upon your immaculate oppressed progeny. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا أبا عبد الله. Salutations upon you, my master, O Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Gharib ya Madloom Karbala. Estranged and oppressed on the land of Karbala. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum sayyidi. We wish we were with you, our master Hussein. فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. For that would be the greatest of victories. غريب كربلاء غريب كربلاء. All together. غريب كربلاء. Estranged on the land of Karbala. Now, Madloom. Madloom Karbala. Madloom Karbala. Madloom Karbala. Oppressed on the land of Karbala. Shaheed Karbala. All together. Shaheed Karbala. Shaheed Karbala. Martyred on the land of Karbala. Let's send our salams to the Imam. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran in the chapter of Fussilat, in the 51st verse, He says, قل لئن اجتمعت الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن لا يأتون بمثله ولو كان بعضهم لبعض ظهيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in this verse that surely if the jinn and men were to support each other and come together to come up with a Quran such as this one, they would fail. Even if they were to support each other, he would say. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue today our discourse and learning through this Knowledge Seekers program, inshaAllah, and uncovering these important facts. We were able to prove the existence of Allah through the proof of organization, that there is an organizer, right? In this organized world, everything is organized, therefore, the world has an organizer. We're able to prove that this organizer is unlimited. We said that a creator of something is greater than what they create. Therefore, the creator of all of limitation must be greater than limitation, and therefore, we're able to prove that since he's unlimited, he doesn't have a beginning and he doesn't have an end, because both of those are limits. Therefore, he always existed and will always exist. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Good. Then we said, okay, that also means he doesn't have flaws, because flaws are limits, right? They're limitations. And so that means he is flawless. And another word for flawless is what? Starts with a P. Perfect. Ahsantum. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all perfect. That means he doesn't make mistakes, right? Doesn't contradict himself. Remember these two things that we just mentioned, because we're going to use them when it comes to proving which message is the message of Allah. We also spoke about trials and tribulations. We said for those who come to you, when you say to them, let's look at the examples in this world of an organized world, some will come to you and say to you, hang on, what about earthquakes? What about natural disasters? What about congenital disorders? What about diseases, right? And what about wars and tyrants and oppressors? And we answered those questions. We said, look, in this system, there are there are trials and tribulations. That's the very nature of the system. We said, because we proved that we have purpose, since Allah is unlimited and He's all perfect, everything He does, we said, He does with what, Ali? He does with a purpose, right? Because He's all purposeful. So that means that we're here for a purpose and for a purpose. And since the Creator Himself, the unlimited, chose for each and every single one of us to exist, that means that the all perfect chose existence for us, which means how worthy are we of existing? A little worthy or very worthy? Very worthy. Ahsantum Hasan, right? So that means then my value is an innate value. It's an inborn value. I'm born with having a value. Why? Because Allah, the all-perfect, chose for me to exist. Got it, Mustafa? Yes? Give me a thumbs up if yes. Good. Salim, you got it? Good. What's your name? Yusuf. You got it too? Good. Barakallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now we said, since we understand this, we also were able to uncover that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since He's all purposeful, everything He does for a reason, right? And that we have a purpose, and our greatest purpose is to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And every challenge that we face in our lives is going to be just, because it's within the system that Allah created. Whether that trial and tribulation comes from Allah, or whether it comes from ma kasabat aydikum, right? Our own choices. And we said there's a logical necessity for choice. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. We said choice is good. Being forced is bad. Nobody likes to be forced, right? Everybody says, oh, I was forced to do it. And everybody will describe being forced to do something, meaning compulsion, as being what? As being oppressive. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. And therefore that makes it unjust. And we proved that Allah is unlimited, all perfect, and therefore He is all purposeful, and He is therefore all just, because everything He does with good reason. Right? Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Good. So then we said, all right, so then within this limited system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, there's going to be trials and tribulations. Some of them are going to be natural disasters. We said for those who die in the natural disasters, Allah chose for them to die at that specific point. He's the only one who has the right to do that. Why? Because He is the creator. He determines how long we live. It is not our right to end our lives prematurely. Make sense? Because He's the one that owns us. Our creator literally owns us. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Right? Because He owns the entire system. So why wouldn't He own you? Right? He created everything. So we said then, we moved on and we said, okay, so based on that then, let's look at human choice. We said there are choices I make. If I choose to smoke, say no to smoking, of course, bad for your health. And I end up with cancer, whose fault is that? Allah's or mine? Mine, right? I can't blame Allah for that, right? But will it be a burden that I can handle? Yes. Okay, why? Because it would be unfair for Allah to burden me with more than I can handle, because He's all perfect. He wouldn't burden me with more than I can handle. Make sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. We also said any choices that come from other people, like we see, for example, right now, Netanyahu, bombing the poor Palestinians, right? We see in the story of Karbala, the tragedy of Karbala, how Yazid, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, Umar ibn Sa'ad are killing the innocent followers of the grandson of the Holy Prophet of Allah, right? We know that our parents are here because of Saddam Hussein, la'natullahi alayhi, and how he persecuted the Shia of Iraq, right? And we see this phenomenon around the world, of course, whether it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan or India or Lebanon or Yemen or wherever else, right? So why does Allah allow this? But because Allah allows choice. And so that means within the system, yes, Allah will not overburden me with more than I can handle, even though it feels sometimes that it's too hard for me to handle. Since I know Allah is all just, it means I can handle it. Any test that I go through in life, I can handle it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only going to give me based on the level that I'm at, right? Because it would be cruel for Allah to give me a trial that I cannot handle. And we said it's exactly like playing on your PlayStation or your Game Boy or your Xbox, that you only move on to the next level of challenges when you've perfected that first level. Make sense? Now, some of you might come and say, yeah, but what about that kid who was stuck under the building, for example, when the earthquake happened in Turkey? Say, but Allah determined that he is capable of doing it. Look, of handling it. Look at how many people were affected and came back to Islam, because he was saying, I just want to tell everyone, that, Ashhadu an la ilaha, or he said his shahada in front of everyone. And everybody was like, wow, how could this child at this age handle this? Look at the children in Palestine, right? That people are looking at them around the world and saying, how can these young kids be so steadfast in their belief? And people started becoming Muslim. Am I right or am I wrong? If I'm right, tell me you're right. You see? So that means Allah will not burden anyone with more than they can handle. We moved on from there. We spoke about chaos theory and coincidence. We showed how there's no such thing as coincidence or randomness. Randomness is just something that we don't know how to measure because we don't have the actual technology. But once it's uncovered, then we're able to show that no, this is a supreme form of organization. We gave the example of Edward Lorenz and we gave the example of Benoit Mandelbrot, right? Two very highly accredited scholars in their own right, in their fields. Edward Lorenz was a Harvard professor, right? And we said Benoit Mandelbrot held 15 PhDs and held the seat of Einstein, and he is the father of modern fractal mathematics, while Edward Lorenz is the father of the term chaos theory, right? So when he studied atmospheric phenomenon, he uncovered the Lorenz algorithm that proves that everything can be measured. We can even predict the weather, okay? And we said, as for Benoit Mandelbrot, the very phone that you use today has a fractal antenna in it. And it's the smallest instance of what an antenna would look like, So we said this is used in our everyday lives today, okay? And they said things that look complicated, they're only complicated because we haven't figured them. So here we're done with all that, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa alaykum. So this was a quick review for those people who weren't here before and are new. This was for your sake. And for those who have been here, this is a good review for you. We do this in the Hawza. My goal is to bring the Hawza, the seminary, to you. This is what we call mubahatha, right? One would teach it to the other. The other would agree with what they're saying or disagree or try to find fault in what they say. You see, Sajjad? Okay? And then we would discuss it. So this is a little taste and a little bit of flavor from the Hawza for you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, we left off yesterday. I told you that we said that part of our purpose, or realizing our purpose, we can do in two ways. We said one is we do what? Ahsant Ali. We emulate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's kind to his creations, therefore we are kind. He gives them chances, therefore we give them chances. He is tolerant, therefore we are tolerant. He is patient, therefore we are patient. People transgress against him. They don't believe in him. He still gives them a chance. We said that breath is what? A chance, another opportunity for them to find Allah and to mend their ways. So we said, who are we not to do the same? So we have to follow the akhlaq of Allah, His ethical system. And that way, not only do we give value to everything, right? Because since Allah created everything, that means everything has worth and has value. And so I must value others, even if I disagree with them, even if I don't agree with how they live. I must value the fact that this person was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so I must make dua for them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them, as opposed to create an enemy out of them. Make sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. Right? Because now this gives you an understanding of kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyatih, which is what Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, that each of you is a shepherd and each of you is responsible for their herd. So you're responsible for me and I'm responsible for you. Make sense, Hassan? Yes? Good. Okay, so then we said there's another way. The second way to realize your purpose, and we said, what is our purpose? Who can remind us? Yes, Ali? Ahsan, that's one of the things, but what is our major purpose? Hassan. Worshipping Allah. And we said worship is equal to what? What is worship? It's an act of thanks and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us everything that He's given us. Therefore, I have to dedicate all of the faculties that He's given me to pleasing Him. Got it, Yusuf? Yes? Dedicate everything that Allah has given you to pleasing Him. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Ahsant. All right. We said then, okay, so we got that part, emulating how Allah is, dedicating all of me to Allah. But are there specific things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do? Like, for example, in every educational system, what do we have? We go into a classroom, we're given what? We're given a textbook. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Right? And that manual tells us what's expected of us in that course. When we buy a car, there's a manual. When we buy a device, there's a manual that comes with it, even if it is a PDF file, right? Even if it is an e-file, an e-book, right? Why? Why do we need this stuff? So that we learn how to use those devices to the best way possible. Am I right? If I'm right, tell me you're right. So then also when we go out, right? And let's say, for example, I decide to tell the shabab, let's go meet, for example, somewhere. And then we forget to tell one of the shabab, okay? One of the brothers, we forget to tell him. But then when we see him the next time after our gathering, we all say, hey, why didn't you come? It was so good. It was so beneficial, right? That's going to make him feel bad. Am I right? Right? So is that fair for me to do, to then say to him, why didn't you show up? What, you don't like us anymore? Right? Would that be fair of us to do? Would it be fair for us to punish him? No, of course not. Why? Because we didn't even tell him in the first place what we expect. You get the same feeling when you go into a classroom and your teacher says, pop quiz, right? You feel oppressed. Why? Because you didn't prepare, you didn't know, right? Allah doesn't give you pop quizzes. Allah tells you in the Quran that I will test you, that you have come into hardship. But with hardship, there will be ease. Inna ma'al usri yusra, he said. Okay? All right. So the next thing is then, what will Allah send me a message? I mean, is He going to send me a Snapchat, Facebook message? He's going to send me something, okay? Right? Is He going to PM me? He's got to send me some sort of message. So I say, okay, well, that means then I have to search for the message of Allah, because for sure, by logical necessity, since He gave me the ability to understand that I need communication in order for me to be able to get the best benefits, out of life, then by logical necessity and by priority, He has to communicate with me. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Good. So now we say, okay, two things we need to figure out. Number one, who is out there saying that they have the message of God? Number two, we need criteria by which to determine whether these messages are truly from God or not. Agreed? And this is where we ended up with the 5 criteria, right? We said there are 5 criteria for a message to be considered a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We said the first 2 are actually based, and actually the last one as well, they're actually based on the characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most important characteristic of Allah, which is that He is what? He is unlimited. Yeah. Ahsant. One meaning unlimited. One sahih. It's not wrong. But I was looking for the word unlimited. That He is unlimited. Okay? So imagine, for example, if we're in a classroom and we had a test, okay? And 2 of the people who were writing the test forgot to write their names. And it was an essay, let's say, composition or something. Now, our English teacher ends up marking, grading our papers. Is she, do you think, would she be able to, let's say between me and Ali, for example, okay, to determine who wrote which paper from our handwriting and from the style of our writing? Do you think so? If she knew us well and she was teaching us, she probably could. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Does that make sense? Yeah? So then that means then the characteristics of the author should be reflected in that which they produce. Make sense? Yes? In their work. Agreed? Right. So then that means that we can use the characteristic of Allah, the most important characteristic, to determine the message. So we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited, which means He doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end. That means that He is constant and unchanged. That means His message must be constant and unchanged. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. That's the first criterion. We said the second criterion is since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited, that means He's flawless, which means that He is all perfect. Right? If I'm right, tell me I'm right. So that means that He doesn't make any mistakes, which means that His message must not have any contradictions or any mistakes in it. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. The third, we said that it has to be that this message corrects false claims made by scholars of past religions or otherwise. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. And then four, we said it has to be that this message has information about the universe that nobody else would know except for the creator of the universe himself. Make sense? It makes sense. It makes sense. And lastly, it's got to be that this message is supernatural, beyond nature, okay? That something that no one can reproduce because its author is supernatural. He is unlimited. Make sense? If it makes sense, it makes sense. Good. So now we have our 5 criteria. Now let's look at what books are available that claim that they are the books of Allah. What religions claim they have the books of Allah? Ali. Judaism is 1. Hassan. Christianity is 2. Ali. Islam is the 3rd. So what are the books? What's the book of Judaism? Torah. Book of Christianity? Injil, meaning the Holy Bible. And the Muslims? Quran, obviously. Ahsantum. So now we want to say, all right, let's look at the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran, and let's subject them to these 5 criteria, and let's see which one makes it through. Then we'll know which one is truly and legitimately the book of God. Make sense? That makes sense? That makes sense. Good. So let's start with the first criterion, which we said that the message has to be constant and unchanged. Now, we need to learn a little about the Torah and the Bible, okay, before we get started here. The Torah itself today is lost. We don't have the Torah. Ages ago, the Torah was actually burned and lost. So what they depend on, what they call the Torah right now, is what they refer to as the Pentateuch, which are known as the 5 books of Moses. Those are the 5 first books of the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. Now, what's the Old Testament? What's the New Testament? The Bible is split up into 2 testaments. In Arabic, we call them Al-Ahd al-Qadim and Al-Ahd al-Jadid. The Old Testament and the New Testament, okay? So, the Old Testament then is what is, those 5 books, major books, are considered to be the Jewish Bible by the Jews. Their replacement for the Torah, okay? And tasamuhan, meaning, just metaphorically, they call it the Torah. Okay? So far, so good? Yes? Got it? If you got it, say I got it. Good. Now, how is the Bible itself formed? The Bible itself, Old Testament and New Testament, are compilations of smaller books called Gospels. What are they called? Gospels, okay? Now, in actual fact, we don't know. Even Christian scholars will tell you that they do not know who 85% at least of the authors of these Gospels are. But they do know one thing. They know that they were human beings, number one, even though they don't know them. They believe that the Holy Spirit entered them and guided their hand to write. Even though they're different people with different stylistic abilities, right? And therefore, what they will produce will be different. Agreed? Just like if I were to write a gospel, Sajjad was to write one, Ali was to write one, Hassan was to write one, Ali was to write one. Each one would be stylistically a little different than the other. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. In addition, the current Bible that we have in our hand is not the original Bible that was revealed to Jesus alayhi salam. And this is something that no one will disagree on. None of the scholars of the Bible will tell you that that was the very Bible that was in the hand of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. No one. Did you know this? Yeah. Okay. They will actually tell you, even if you Google it, that this Bible was written 100 years to 1,300 years after the death of Jesus. Is that interesting? How many knew this by show of hands? Few of you. Good. So now that tells us, and since the original Bible doesn't exist, what we do have is, though, we have 2 of the oldest versions of the Bible are considered to be translations, okay, of the Bible. And they're the Septuagint and the Vulgata. One is Greek, one is Latin. They are considered to be translations of the original Aramaic Bible. Okay? Got it so far? If you got it, say you got it. Is this too much information for you? Or we're good? Okay, good. So now we say, all right, well, since we don't have the original Bible, then, and the Torah was also burned, that means both of them don't meet the original, the first criterion. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Because the first criterion was what? Was that the message has to be constant and unchanged. So if we don't have it, then we can't say it's constant and unchanged because it's not there anymore. So it's not constant, right? For in both cases. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. So now we look at the Holy Quran. What do we find? We find the Holy Quran exists. If you, from the time that it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad 1400 years ago, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, to this very day, anywhere you go in the world, right? The Holy Quran is exactly the same. The chapters are organized the same way. The verses are organized the same way. Each word has the same harakat on it, whether it's fatha, dhamma, or kasra. Wherever you are, whether you're in China, the islands of Micronesia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Europe, Antarctica, you know, wherever you are, okay? North Pole, South Pole, doesn't matter. Got it, Salim? Yeah? Ahsant, barakallah bik. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. ثانية أنا أحب الحسن والحسين. So then that tells us what? That the Holy Quran is constant. Now some will come to you and say, yeah, but you guys have different versions of the Quran just like the Christians have. We say, no. Say the different versions that exist of the Bible are translations of translations. We don't have the original Aramaic Bible, right? But the Quran, we have Qurans that go way back, right? To the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, right? To the times of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi, you see? And they're all in the original Arabic as they were revealed, you see? So that means then only the Quran is constant and unchanged out of those three. Right off the bat, we can now cancel out the Bible and the Torah. And now we can focus on the Holy Quran. Agreed? But I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's humor me for a minute. Let's see when it comes to the Torah and the Bible, meaning the Old Testament and the New Testament, if they meet the second criterion, okay? The second criterion, which was what? That it has to have no contradictions or mistakes in it, right? So let's take a look at the Old Testament. The very first book of the Pentateuch or the Old Testament, does anybody know what it's called? Anyone? Genesis. Ahsantum, exactly, right? So in Genesis, in chapter 7, verse 1. Chapter 7, verse 1. What chapter? What verse? Good. It says that Noah was seen by Allah, and this is supposedly God speaking, that Noah was the most righteous of his generation. That's what it says, right? In chapter 9, verses 20 to 25, it states that when the ark of Noah anchored on the shore, he basically became a husbandman and he planted a vineyard. That's curious. Why would he plant a vineyard? Isn't a vineyard for making wine? Agreed? Right? So you read on, what does it say? It says specifically that he made wine and he was found by his son in his tent, naked and drunk. Hold on, I thought this was the most righteous person of his generation. If he was the most righteous person of his generation, doesn't that not mean that he was a prophet? Would you agree with that statement? If Allah's saying this about you, then you got to be a prophet. But here it depicts him as being drunk. He's naked, okay, maybe he's in his tent, he's changing his clothes, could happen, right? But drunk? Now, this is where we have to say this is a contradiction. If somebody comes to you and says to you, no, hang on, maybe at that time drinking wasn't haram, it wasn't prohibited. We say, okay, well, let's look further into the Bible. Let's look into Proverbs, okay? Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1, chapter 23, verse 20, and chapter 23, verse 32. What do these three verses? Chapter 20 verse 1 says, and wine is a mocker, and whomever is deceived is unwise. That wine makes an idiot out of the person that drinks it. And whoever partakes, takes a drink, is considered to be a righteous person, would you say? No. So then there's a contradiction here, right? Obviously, God is saying, do not drink wine, otherwise you're going to be turned into an imbecile, right? And you're going to be what? You're not going to be considered by Allah to be a wise person. And you will have been, deceived by a red liquid. I mean, what kind of intellect must this individual have? Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. All right, let's look at the next verse. It says, and be not amongst wine bibbers, riotous, eaters of flesh. Don't be among people who drink wine. Wine bibbers. Now, wine bibber could be a person who, when they drink wine, they drink so much that it spills all over them. Okay? So here, clearly, it's saying don't be among them. Now, don't be among them may mean don't be one of them, or it might be don't even be near them or with them. So avoid them, right? رِجْسٌ مِنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ, Allah says in the Holy Quran. So it's very similar. All right. So obviously that contradicts Noah being drunk. In the third verse that we mentioned, 23:32, what does it say? It says, it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. Now a serpent, what does it do? Wraps itself around you, squeezes the air out of you, squeezes the life out of you, right? Takes a hold of you, right? It biteth like a serpent, takes a bite out of you, and stingeth like an adder, meaning that it's venomous, poisonous, right? Like an adder. And we know that alcohol is poisonous for your brain cells and for your liver, right? So then how can this be something good? Because if a prophet partakes in it, then others will follow. And the prophet is there to be followed, a representative of Allah. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. So far there's a contradiction. Again, now let's look at the New Testament. Luke, okay? Chapter 1 verse 15. What does it say? Speaking about Prophet Yahya. And he was great in the sight of the Lord. And he neither drank wine nor strong drink. Now this is a prophet. It says about Prophet Yahya, he was amazing. Allah saw him as being the best in his sight. And someone like that is not allowed to drink wine or strong drink, meaning anything that has alcohol in it. You see? So clear contradiction. So now I can't take the Bible, neither the Old nor the New Testament, because they contradict. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Good. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll cover the third criterion and hopefully the fourth criterion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight, brothers and sisters, is the night of Al-Qasim, the son of Al-Imam Al-Hasan. They say that Al-Qasim saw Al-Imam Al-Hussein, his uncle, all alone on the battlefield. All the men had been slaughtered from the holy household as well as from his companions. So what does he do? He goes up to his uncle. He says, dear uncle, please give me the opportunity to protect the holy household of Allah. Let me fight in your way and let me be martyred on the land of Karbala. He looks at him. He says, Bunay, anta al-wadi'a. Dear son, you are the trust that was entrusted to me by your father, Imam Al-Hasan. When I see you, it's as though I see my brother with me. Please go back to your tent. Be with your mother. So he goes back to his tent. He talks to his mom. His mom says, go back and ask. Ask your uncle. He goes back and asks. They say 3 times he goes back and forth, and the Imam wouldn't let him. He keeps telling him, Anta al-wadi'a. So now, the last time he goes to his mother and he says to her, what do I do? She says, come, dear son. She opens up a chest and she puts the helmet of the Imam, his father, on him, his tunic. She gives him his sword and she gives him a letter. He goes towards Al-Imam Al-Hasan, salamullahi alayhi, and he says to him, oh, my uncle, here's a letter from my father, Al-Hasan. He opens it and he reads it and his eyes start to tear. He says, the letter states in it, dear brother Hussein, if you are receiving this letter, then know that I am with you on the land of Karbala. You are in Karbala and it is the day of Ashura. And my son has come to you as my representative. I want him to represent me on the land of Karbala on the day of Ashura. Imam Hussein salamullahi alayhi knew then that he had to send his son, his the son of Imam al-Hassan into the battlefield. So he tells him, okay, I will send you out. He hugs him, they cry, and he sends him out into the battlefield. He was only 12 or 13. He goes out, he fights a valiant fight, he kills a few of the men, but then the lace on his sandal falls apart. So he goes down to be able to fix it, and one of the evil men from the warriors from the other side sees this, and he runs towards him and he strikes him on his head, and he falls to the ground calling out, Amma Hussein, help me. Imam Hussein kills the people around him, and he comes to his side and he says, Bunay ya'azzu ala ammika and tunadihi fala yujibuk. It is so tough for your uncle that you would call upon him and he is unable to answer you, and you ask for his support and he is unable to support you. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Al-Qasim would take his last breath and he would be martyred on the land of Karbala. هل من منادي ينادي وقاسما ومظلوما وشهيدا وغريبا. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. Oh Allah, we ask you and beseech you that you accept what little we offered, that you rid us from all oppressors in this world, those oppressing the people of Palestine, of Iraq, of Lebanon, of Afghanistan, of Pakistan, of India, of Yemen. Oh Allah, remove the oppression from all those who are oppressing the mu'mineen, Ya Allah, and hasten the appearance of an Imam al-Hajj. Oh Allah, give health to our sick, repay the debts of all those who are in debt. Oh Allah, we ask you and beseech you, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. And I ask all of you, dear brothers and sisters, all of you have hajat. Two of my relatives, they are very sick. Ala or Abu Ala, they're in Hamilton. Please remember them in your dua. May Allah bless you, inshallah. Also, we say, آخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين والفاتحة على أرواح المرحومين مسبوقة مشفوعة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد ونسألكم الدعاء.